Why some cops still fear the mob. Even though organized crime has been largely dismantled in this country, there are still some cops who fear the mafia. But why? Organized crime groups may be smaller today than they were in the 80s or 70s, but they're still around, and even today, members of the mafia can face up to 20 years in prison for racketeering charges. But most of the mafia bosses are out of the game now. You know, too old or dead. This is true, except for a small number of cops who still live in fear of the mob. Why? That's what we'll investigate today. Greetings, everybody. It's me. And let's get into this. The mafia is not something that Americans have much experience with these days. Most people think it's a myth, a fairy tale told to scare children who don't behave. But the truth is that the mafia is very real, and although many of their members are behind bars, they haven't completely gone away. And if you're a cop, you might just believe that they've gone away because you're more likely to run into one of these guys than the average citizen. But you should never let your guard down. These guys are sneaky and vicious. And just because you see them every day doesn't mean you've seen them all. It would take a long time to explain how deep the mafia roots are in this country. And to be honest, I'm not qualified to do so. But it is no secret that it is very difficult to beat an organization that has been around since the early 1900s. The mafia are extremely well established and they have their fingers in almost every pie. They own restaurants, casinos, nightclubs, construction companies, and even legitimate businesses. They also have their hands in illegal activities such as gambling, extortion, and arms trafficking. But if you ever try to bring them down, they will stop at nothing to protect themselves. They will bribe anyone they need to, destroy anyone who gets in their way, and kill without hesitation if necessary. And when the feds started to crack down on the mafia during the 1980s and 90s, the body count was staggering. Hundreds of people were murdered during this period, including cops, lawyers, and judges. When cops die in the line of duty, we usually hear about it. There are memorials, funerals, and ceremonies. The city mourns the loss, and the police department does everything they can to support the family left behind. But sometimes, especially in cases where the mob is involved, things are kept quiet. When a cop is killed by the mob, they don't want it to be known, and the family is often threatened into silence. Many people believe that this never happens anymore. After all, the mafia isn't as powerful as they once were. But it is important to remember that just because the mafia is in the headlines as often as they used to be, does mean that they are not still active. You see, the thing about the mafia is that they operate in the shadows. They're not out there trying to get attention. They understand that being low-key is the best way to stay out of trouble. In fact, the mafia is probably more active now than they've ever been. They're just better at hiding it. So if a cop is killed by the mafia today, it's likely that no one will ever find out. There have been many high-profile cases where the mafia has gotten away with murder. One of the most famous cases is the murder of a federal agent named Jimmy Hoffa. Hoffa was the head of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, a powerful union that represents workers in the transportation industry. Hoffa was a controversial figure, to say the least. He was suspected of having ties to the mafia, and he was eventually convicted of bribery and fraud. But despite his criminal record, Hoffa was very popular among the rank and file of the Teamsters. When Hoffa was released from prison in 1964, he vowed to clean up the union, but he was soon killed, and the mafia made sure that his death would go unsolved. To this day, nobody knows for sure what happened to Hoffa's body. Another famous case is the murder of a journalist named Anthony Scotto. Was a reporter for the New York Daily News, and he was working on a story about the mafia when he was killed. Scotto had been receiving anonymous threats, and it was clear that someone wanted him dead. But despite the danger, Scotto continued to work on his story. He was eventually found shot to death in his car, and although several people were arrested in connection with his death, the case was never solved. These are just two examples of the many cases where the mafia has gotten away with murder, and that's why so many cops still fear them today. We already talked about how cops are more likely to encounter mobsters than the average person, so it should come as no surprise that many of them have witnessed things that they can't unsee. For example, one cop said that he saw a mafia boss in a local restaurant and he could help but stare. The boss caught the cop's eye and gave him a warning look. The cop quickly looked away, but he could feel the boss's eyes burning into him. Another cop told a story about how he pulled over a car for speeding. The driver was a mafia associate, and he tried to bribe the cop to let him off. The cop refused the bribe, and the associate became very angry. He started to threaten the cop and his family, and the cop had to draw his gun. But even at gunpoint, the associate didn't back down. He told the cop that he would be sorry and that he shouldn't have resisted. Obviously, cops like these can't talk about these experiences in public. If they did, they would be putting themselves and their families in danger. But it's important to remember that these stories are not made up. They're not urban legends. They're real-life occurrences that have happened to real people. And that's why it's so important to respect the dangers that cops face every day. Now, you might be wondering why cops don't just arrest all the mafia members. After all, they're criminals. So why not lock them up? Well, the problem is that the mafia is very good at hiding their activities. They understand that the authorities are always looking for them, so they take great pains to keep their operations under wraps. For example, they may run their illegal activities through legitimate businesses, so it can be hard to tell where the line is drawn. They also have a lot of assets, so they can hire expensive lawyers who will fight tooth and nail to keep them out of jail. Finally, the mafia is a secretive organization. Its members don't talk to outsiders, so it can be hard to get the evidence needed to make an arrest. So while it may seem easy to just arrest all the mafia members, the reality is that it's not. It takes a lot of time and effort to build a case against them. And even then, there's no guarantee that it will result in a conviction. Now, you might be thinking that the mafia is no big deal. After all, they're just a bunch of criminals. But that's not really true. The mafia is a dangerous organization. Its members are violent, and they won't hesitate to use force to achieve their goals. And even though they may seem like just a bunch of guys hanging out in smoky back, they're actually a highly efficient and effective organization. They have been around for over 100 years, and they have survived countless attempts to bring them down. So don't underestimate the mafia. They may be smaller than they once were, but they're still around, and they're still dangerous. In conclusion, cops still fear the mob for a number of reasons. First, the mob is a dangerous organization and its members are violent and unpredictable. Second, the mob is secretive and its activities are hard to track down. And third, the mob is well organized and its members are smart and resourceful. All of these factors make the mob a formidable opponent, and that's why some cops still fear them. So the next time you see a cop, be sure to thank him or her for her service and be aware that they may be facing dangers that you're not aware of. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button below and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an exciting episode. Have a great day and stay safe.